Hey there, everybody. We are back with another deck profile for you today. This week, we will be showcasing a lot of decks that I've just really had a lot of fun crafting and testing out with. As the competitive BT13 season wraps up, I figured I would just take some time to explore and, bring back some old archetypes that may have gotten a few more support pieces in BT13. Coincidentally, some of these decks are pretty viable for the Ultimate Cup format. And like I said, they've just been really fun to play, and I thought you guys would like to see them. So the first deck that we're going to talk about, as you can probably see here in the photo, is what we now call at locals GabuFlare. It is a pet project of mine, being someone who has just been a huge GabuBond fan back in the day, and a huge just Gabumon fan in general. So without further ado, here is the deck profile. Alright, so to start with the eggs, we're going to be running 4 of the BT11 Wanyamon. Wanya, when attacking once per turn, you get to draw 1 if you have a blue Tamer in play. More often than not with this deck, you will have a blue Tamer, so that's not going to be a very difficult effect to proc off. And with this deck in particular, the more draw power you get, the more consistency cycle you can get, the better. And I think that's why Wanya is just the perfect egg for that. Moving on to our rookies. We're going to start off with 4 of the BT10 Gaussmon. Gauss on deletion will let you play out a blue flare, suspended from your hand without paying the play cost. Usually, I think it's a pretty good card. It's a staple for your straight-up blue flare mechanic. I do think you have to be a little bit careful now that you're running sort of a split archetype now with Bond and blue flare. So sometimes you have to be careful about which on-play you proc. And we'll get more into that as we talk about our level 4 package, but you don't want to just blindlessly swing and just, throw out Gauss out there and proc an on deletion and proc an on play effect from your level 4 that maybe you don't want to be procking. So I do think you have to be a little bit more careful with this, but I still think it provides a lot of value. You get to get an early swing in, you get to draw off a Wanya potentially, and you get to play out another body. I mean, that's still very, very good value, and I still think why you run it in this deck. Next, we are playing 2 of the original Drabu from BT1. On play, you get to just trigger draw 1. Still a pretty good consistency piece. It's a cheap body to throw out there, particularly early game, where sometimes that early body is just good for swinging. So again, draw power is huge, so you run it at 2. And it's a Gabumon, right? So it is a potential Meta Ashita target. The next card we're playing, rookie-wise, is 4 of the EX1 Gabumon. This card is pretty good for its inheritable. Inheritable effect being, when attacking once per turn, you can cycle through the top 3, and then you get to pick up 1 Tamer card or 1 Digimon with Gabumon in name. So it's a bit unfortunate that you can't pick up 2, right? Like 1 Tamer and 1 Digimon. But the fact that you can get that cycle going is still pretty good. It's an early game, just cycler, which, getting your pieces is important in the early game, obviously. So this allows you to do that. Usually, this is the early game rookie I would like to Digivolve to in the back if I can help it, because of the inheritable. And last but not least, 4 of the pretty BT6 Gabumon. Just a really good card for the inheritable. Its all turns effect is okay. Once per turn when a Meta Ashita is played, you get to gain a memory. More often than not, this guy is sort of sitting and raising where this effect won't proc, so you don't have to really worry about that too much. What's really important is its inheritable, which is when attacking once per turn, you can unsuspend a Digimon if it's Gabumon Bond of Friendship. And for some reason, this effect caught a lot of people off guard when I was trying to play this in the BT11 meta. I don't know why, but the fact that I think people just forgot about how this works. So just to put that out there, the Gabumon will allow your Bond of Friendship to unsuspend on top of its sort of inherited restand effect. So you could potentially swing with Bond 3 times if you have this Gabumon as an inheritable, which is the ideal target for mid to late game, is that if you can digivolve, you would like to digivolve into that this BT6 Gabumon here, because it's sort of as a threat to your opponent, right? Like you have this guy in raising, if you have a mat in play, like it is a threat to go into Bond of Friendship next turn, if you have the right resources. So I think a late game Digimon for sure. Next, for our level 4s, we're going to start off with 2 of the EX2 Leomon. I still think a pretty good card. Leomon being during your opponent's turn, if you have a blue Tamer in play, you get to give it blocker, which is not bad. Particularly with Bond trashing security, sometimes having a blocker on field is pretty good. On deletion, it's also very nice in terms of memory manipulation, as you gain 2 memory and you get to draw a card. So late game, it's a nice blocker that makes your opponent think of like, well, if he blocks and he dies, well, like I'm gonna lose 2 memory, right? But early game, it's like a just nice chip piece, right? Like if you have EX1 Gabumon on top of or below a Leomon, you get to swing, cycle. If Leo dies, you gain 2 memory, you get to draw another card, and you get a little bit more memory to work with to maybe play out a Tamer or play out another Digimon for cycle purposes. So I think both early and late game Leomon is a pretty good and solid card. Next, we will run 2 Lanamon from BT12. Hybrid for game is still a very viable strat, in this deck. You will have a lot of Tamers in play, and sometimes you just need that extra swing to go for lethal, and Lanamon can give you that. I also think it's a pretty good just straight up Digivolve, because it is a 2-cost Digivolve to go on top of a level 3. When Digivolving, you get to slip a level 3 blue Digimon from your hand underneath as an inheritable to give Lanamon jamming. So you get to swing with jamming, 1 check, and then the body stays on board. It doesn't carry over, like you don't get to repeat that effect. But the fact that your opponent sort of just has to deal with a 4K body that's on the board is annoying for them, and they almost have to commit to just getting rid of it, right? So I do think as like a tempo card, like it's not bad, and it's also good for a lethal strat too. So if I could bump Lana up to 3, I think I most definitely would. Deck space is pretty tight, which is why I don't do it. But, I think Lana is not bad, and like I said, if I can bump her up to 3 and find a way to do that, I most definitely would. Now we're going to start getting into our blue flare package. So we're going to keep 2 of the old BT10 Mailbird. On play, if you don't have a Kiriha in play, you can go ahead and play a Kiriha. If you have a Kiriha in play, you can pick up a Metal Grave from trash, which is good recursion and good just on-play value. Inheritable's not bad either when attacking once per turn. If your opponent has 2 or more Digimon in field, you get to choose one and just stun, meaning that they can't attack or block until the end of their next turn. So 2 of the old Mailbird, followed up by 4 of the new EX4 Mailbird. This one, I think, of the 2 is the better Mailbird if you have a choice. On play, it's a mini ice wall, so you can give one of your opponents the effect of, when attacking, lose 2 memory. So a pretty good sort of finesse control piece. But more importantly, it's an inheritable, which is it has jamming, when swinging. So your Metal Graze with this as an inheritable will stay on board and forces your opponent to deal with it, right? Because if they don't, there's another check coming with jamming next turn. So they kind of are forced to, again, commit resources to get rid of that Metal Greymon. Next, we are just running 1 of the EX4 Greymon, mainly as just another Greymon target, as an additional target, because sometimes not having that extra piece is a little bit painful. So increasing your Greymon count to a total of 5, I felt like was helpful. Its on play isn't great, I'll be honest with you. Reveal the top 3 cards, and you can add a Kiriha or a Digimon with cross requirements, which again is like, or all right. Like it's not great, but it's okay for cycle. Its inheritable, I think, is not bad for, again, consistency, as you are able to draw 1 when attacking. It's not a once per turn, so if you are able to somehow unsuspend, you can draw again. But I think, unfortunately, with this deck, you won't be unsuspending your Metal Grays unless you have the other Greymon as the inheritable. So you will More often than not, just draw 1. Again, it's really there just for the target. And then last but not least, we are running 4 of the BT10 Greymon here. I think your best BlueFlare searcher, because on play you are able to just look at the top 4 cards and then pick up 2 pieces with BlueFlare in traits. And it's inheritable when attacking. If there are 2 or more cards on your opponent's field, you get to unsuspend the Digimon. So not bad. Again, I think you do have to be a little bit careful, right? Because now that you're running that split archetype, meaning that you've got 2 different archetypes sort of in this deck, you run the risk of losing out on pieces that you need from the other, right? So like Greymon, for example, if you search 4, yeah, you get to pick up 2 Greymon pieces, but if you're really hurting for that mat or really hurting for that bond of friendship, there's a very good chance that you bottom deck it with Greymon. And vice versa, right? You know, with EX1 GabuMon with its 1 attacking cycle, there's a good chance that you bottom deck that Metal Greymon that you're looking for, or the Mailbird that you're looking for, or the Greymon that you're looking for. So you really do have to be careful with how you choose to proc your searches, because, you know, you do run the risk of bottom decking a piece that you need. Mainly to say, you know, as you're going through your cycle and going through your draws, like, be wary of what's going on, right? Like, you need, like, that's just a basic game strat that you should be able to pick up on as you kind of get used to the game, is that as you draw, as you see what's coming out in security, you should be able to kind of think about your ratios and say, like, I'm due for a mat coming up, so if I play this Greymon and I search, I'm more likely to bottom deck it, right? And vice versa. Like, you've seen a lot of bond pieces, but like, I'm not really seeing a lot of BlueFlare pieces. If I swing and proc my EX1 GabuMon effect, there's a very good chance that I miss out on my BlueFlare pieces if I do that. So sometimes being a bit cautious with how you do some of these search on plays and when attacking is going to be a lot more sensitive now, because you sort of split your archetypes. So just something to keep in mind when you're procking a lot of these effects. Moving on to the level 5s. We are running 4 of the BT10 Metal Greymon. I think this is the better Metal Greymon of the 2. I think both are very good for BlueFlare. But I think in this particular deck, BT10 Metal Grey is just so much better. Because you don't really care as much about source strip with this deck, right? Like, you really just want to be able to stun, board control, and then go for a big explosive play. So this Metal Greymon is a 7 play cost, but it does have a Digicross -2, meaning that if you have your pieces underneath, meaning your Greymon and your Mailbirdmon, you can -2 to the play cost for each source that you have. So if you have both, you can play this for 3. If you only have 1, you can play it for 5. On play, you have Rush, meaning that you can swing that turn, and then you can go ahead and stun up to 3 Digimon with equal to or lesser sources than this card. Meaning that if you have your Greymon and your Mailbird source, you will have 2 sources. You can go ahead and stun up to 3 Digimon with 2 or less sources, which can come up pretty big, you know, and kind of cause a lot of frustrating, you know, tempo plays on your end and also tempo plays on your opponent's end. Right now, they can't swing with things that want to be swung with or deleted, whatnot. So I think the stunning is very helpful for this deck, which is why I'm running 4 of this one and not like a 2-2 split of the new EX4 Metal Greymon. And last, to round out our Digimon, we are running 4 of this beautiful, beautiful boy, GabuMon Bond of Friendship. 1 attacking, once per turn. If you have a Tamer in play, you unsuspend this card, which is pretty good. As I said before, coupled with your BT6 GabuMon inheritable, you could potentially swing 3 times with Bond of Friendship. And what made this card so cracked and so broken back in the BT6 meta was its 1 attacking effect. Note that the 1 attacking effect is not a once per turn or whatever. It's literally every time you swing, you get to proc this, which is return one of your opponent's level 5 or lower Digimon to the bottom of the deck. So if you can imagine back in BT6, I mean, you were bottom decking everybody, right? Like, it was a pretty much guaranteed board wipe with Bond coming into play. even now, like you are bottom decking a good amount of important pieces and sort of stalling their progression or kind of wiping out their stack, which can be huge, and swing the tempo greatly in your favor. Note that it is 14k DP, so to a lot of your burst mode pieces, if you're playing against Royal Knights, for example, that's a deck where sometimes Bond is a bit of a scary warp, because if you swing once and hit a big guy, Bond's gonna die, and you don't have a lot of DP boosts that, for example, that are available to say like Mirage Galgamon or whatnot, where you can get it up to like 16, 17k and swing freely. Bond, unfortunately, will be stuck at 14. So there is a chance that it can die going into big security stacks, which, is a chance that you take. So just be wary of that when playing with this card. But I think it's still a really, really good card for what it's able to do. So probably your big boss monster, and yeah, not much else to say about it. Moving on to our Tamers, we've got two of the BT10 Kiriha. Memory setter, memory being very important for this deck, and it allows you to kind of save and keep your GabuFlare pieces going and digicross with your resources. So you run this at a 2 of. Because, moving on to our next Tamer, we run 3 of your triple Tamer from BT10 as well, or BT11. So the triple Tamer, for those who don't remember, start of your main phase, you can tuck a Digicross or a cross hard GabuFlare card underneath the Tamer to give yourself 1 memory and to give yourself the ability to draw 1. So I really like this card as opposed to BT10 Kiriha, mainly because of that draw effect, right? Like I said before, like you really want to be drawing as much as possible in this deck, and sometimes searching hurts you. So if you're able to just straight up draw and just take the hand, that works so much more in your favor than searching and then bottom decking an important piece. So the ability to draw really just ramps up your game plan so much more. And the ability to just gain memory too is also very helpful for this deck. So I think the triple Tamer is a very, very clutch card. And when paired with the next Tamer, which is BT6 Matt Ashita, like you are going to be ramping your memory up to a ton potentially, which lets you do a lot of plays and kind of closes out the game very quickly. So BT6 Matt, for those of you who don't remember, when you promote a Gabumon or a Garurumon card from raising into the battle area, you gain a memory and draw 1. So very similar to what Yuji wants to do for your Alphamon decks. And then main phase, once per turn, you are able to warp a Gabumon in the battle area into a Bond of Friendship for the Digivolution cost, meaning you can warp from a Gabumon into Bond of Friendship for 3, which is pretty darn good, right? The caveat being is if you are to warp, you have to trash top 2 security, and if you have 1 or more security cards in your stack at the end of your turn, Bond of Friendship will die. So that Digimon gets deleted and it's no more. So if you can imagine with that, you really want to be using Bond as sort of like a late game finisher as opposed to a early mid game poke, because you're putting yourself at a pretty vulnerable spot by trashing top 2 security. And then, yes, you can kind of stall your opponent's resources out by bottom decking, say, like a level 5 or whatnot, if you're anticipating a big play turn. But the fact that you trash top 2 security and then lose your Digimon on top of that can be hard, right? And it can be quite painful. So I really utilize Bond more so as a late game finisher, where it's like, this is the end game, I'm going into Bond to close it out. The last Tamer we're running is just one of EX4 Kiriha Nene. I like it just because you can Digicross from trash, which can be helpful, particularly if you're missing your triple Tamer or your Kiriha. You gain a memory if there's 2 or more on the field, which is a pretty easy requirement to hit. I like the triple Tamer better than this, like I said, because of the draw power that the triple Tamer gives you, which is why I'm only going to do 1 of this. I originally had like a 2-2 split where I had 2 of this and then 2 of the triple Tamer, but I want to see the triple tamer a lot more than this, which is why I kept it in because it's still helpful, but I'm favoring the triple tamer in my ratios. Last, to round out our options, is just one Ice Wall. It's Ice Wall. Like, you kind of have to run it. It's a good security bomb. You give your opponent lose 2 memory when swinging to help stall out a turn. So not much else to say about Ice Wall. And then we wrap it up with 2 Hammer Spark. Again, it's a pretty good security bomb. You know, you gain 2 memory if it's hitting security, and then you can also prolong your own plays as well if you just need that extra memory for like a hybrid for game or an extra metal gray swing and whatnot. So I think Hammer Spark is a pretty helpful resource card to have as a 2 of in the deck. That'll do it for the deck profile. I'm going to do a very quick segment on like a combo play that we can do. So let's move into that. All right, so this is a very idealized board, right? So obviously things aren't always going to work out like this, but this is sort of the basic idea of, you know, what this deck can do, and in an ideal scenario, like this is what you want to be able to do, right? So say this is your setup. You've got your BT6 GabuMon and raising. You've got these 2 Tamers out, the 2 triple Tamers, the Kiriha, and then you've got your 2 Manashitas up here. So obviously Kiriha starts you off at 3. If you say choose to promote, skipping your breeding phase, you promote. Main phase effect of, you know, Mat will proc, meaning that you gain 2 memory and draw 2, which already value right there. So now you're up to 5. Now at the start of your main phase, you can go ahead and slip a Greymon and slip a male bird underneath the 2 triple Tamers to again draw 1, gain 1 for each. So now you have gained 2 memory and drawn 2 cards via the triple Tamer effect. So now you're up to 7 memory, right? You again are able to then go into Bond of Friendship for 3. You do have to trash top 2 security, but by doing so, you get to swing with Bond. You draw for Wanya. You can proc Bond of Friendships when attacking once per turn if there's a Tamer in play to restand. If you bottom deck a level 5, great, you bottom deck a level 5. You can go ahead, swing again with Bond of Friendship. Now procking Gabumon's Inheritable, which is, if this is a Gabumon Bond of Friendship, you can unsuspend it. That's 2 checks. You can then go into Bond of Friendship once again, swing for your 3rd check, and Bond is done, right? Then you can go ahead, tap your Kiriha to bring out your 2 blue flare pieces, going into a metal gray for 3. So now you are effectively again at 1 memory. You can go ahead and do metal gray things, which is on stun the board, then swing with jamming, 1 check. If they've played into your strat, great, but if you swung with Bond, again, you probably have bottom decked everything, so you'll probably only do 1 check, right, with Metal Greymon. You do 1 check with jamming, fine. Then you can Hammer Spark to go back up to 2, go into Alana, and go Hybrid for your 5th check. You've effectively cleared out their security, right? And that's just 1 turn. It's also assuming you haven't poked at all, right? If you have an early poke with a Gaussmon or a Gabumon, I mean, that Lana is a hybrid for game. So this is what the deck can do in 1 turn. Like I said, it's a very idealized setup and a very sort of like best case scenario situation. You know, it's not always going to play out that way because that's what card games are about. But I do think it's a fun mechanic. It's a fun archetype that I really wanted to bring back and just have fun with again. So that's my take on it. Let me know what you guys think. And we'll see you on the next one.